Good evening. Welcome to the Finance Board meeting for Wednesday, March 27th, 2024. We'll call the meeting to order at 5:01 p.m. The first item on the agenda is an update on the Community Preservation Committee projects by Mike Dempsey. Mike, thanks for joining us. I know when we had you in earlier, you guys had not voted on the final projects, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity to come in and just present those to us.
Thank you. Yeah, so the community, I'm here, let me turn that. I'm here representing the Community Preservation Committee, and we just met last Thursday to finalize one more project. When I came to you last, we had 8 proposals, but one of the proposals was withdrawn. So currently, there are 7 projects that will be presented at annual town meeting on April 29th. And I will just very briefly go over what they are and the amount. And then in front of you, you've got a description, which is basically the same information that I gave you before. And you can ask any questions. So the first one is the Community Garden Design Phase 1, asking for $4,950, and it is in the recreation category. The second one is the Washington Hall on the National Historic Registry for $6,600, and that's in the historic preservation category. Third is the Shade and Seating at the Pines project, and that is requesting $21,426, and that's in the recreation category. Fourth one is the town clerk scanning of documents for $33,000, and that's in the historic preservation category. The fifth one is Perry Park Design Phase 1 for $30,800, and that's in the recreation category. Sixth is the Pines Parking Enhancements for $523,110 in recreation category. And then the last one is the Shanahan Field Parking project for $886,800, and again, that's in the recreation category. We did have some updates on the Perry Park Design Phase project. It will now include addressing parking improvements, invasive plant removal down there, and also engage with the abutters and any interested residents. So with those changes and with those additions, the committee approved that last week. Also, just mention that I presented these projects with the dollar amounts to the selectmen on Monday, and all were voted to go forward at annual town meeting. So these will be on the town meeting warrant.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Mike while he's here?
This is the third occasion for that parking lot.
Second one.
Now, the one was to move the house up the street.
Oh,
Remember
yeah,
one?
that was all last year.
So, is there any detail on the breakdown of that 886,800 other than the number?
Oh, yeah, the
Can I see it?
entire budget is in the proposal.
Where's the proposal?
Well, I don't know if I sent you all the proposals.
Oh, you
I can
didn't.
send them all
I
to
mean,
you.
spending that kind of money.
Yeah, no, it's
I
very
mean,
well,
this is ridiculous.
it's very well detailed.
Well, we'll see. I'm not happy about that. So, whatever the boards decide, I'm gonna vote against that. How many I don't even, I've drove around town the last couple of days. We got more projects undone, and now we're gonna add to the list.
No,
Oh.
I mean, actually, there aren't, you know, the majority of the ones that aren't done are the ones that were voted last year in the Pines, and there's a few others that were voted last year that are ongoing. Rebecca and I have worked very diligently, I would say, to make sure that projects that either never happened or were ongoing have been ended, and we'll be doing that again, going through that process again. So, being only a volunteer committee, we don't have anybody who's, you know, working directly for the committee and for the town to oversee, to make sure, you know, things are getting closed out. But we have a process to do that, and we're hoping to improve on that process during the next fiscal year.
So when will the skate park be done? When will the board, whatever, the skateboard thing?
Yeah, I think they're on
I got
schedule to be
Someone
done.
comes in here and makes a 20-minute PowerPoint thing and then goes away, and all I see is Rebecca doing all the work.
Well, some of those projects are projects that Rebecca put forward, so that's probably the reason why. But I think
Well,
they're all on schedule to be completed this year. I really think that most of the projects that we voted last year will all be done during this calendar year.
but I don't know that. You don't have dates, you don't have anything. I mean, this is major money. We're scrambling around trying to cut paper, okay, and shit, okay? And now, okay, I see, what's the hurry to have all this done right now? And finish up the ones that we haven't done.
There's no hurry. The process,
It's
you know,
slow.
you know, I mean, you served on the CPC, so you know the process. There's no necessarily timelines that are required. You know, as people and organizations and committees and departments present proposals, you know, they're addressed, they're examined to
Talking
make
about
sure,
the other
you know, they
ones.
fit in, and then they're brought to town meeting. And so basically, town meeting decides whether or not they want to do them. And, you know, some of the projects have failed. Some of the projects weren't voted at town meeting, as the Shanahan Field one was failed last year. So, you know,
But what makes you think it'll pass this year?
hmm?
What makes you think it will pass this
I
year?
don't know. I'm not going to
No.
weigh in on that.
All right.
I certainly hope it passes, but
So,
I don't know.
again, where can I get a copy of the breakdowns of the estimates?
Yeah, I'll send them to you.
Okay, thank you.
Were those competitively bid? Did you go to get several bids from contractors?
We don't, the process for a proposal is, we don't get bids. It's up to the person who is putting the project together to do due diligence to find the estimated cost. And so what's voted at town meeting is a number that's up to that amount. That's the worst case that we can spend on the project. So what will happen, especially in the cases of these two larger, you know, projects, those will be put out to a specific bid, competitive bid. So again, we found in the past that when things are put on competitive bid, they come in lower than that price. So hopefully, you know, these two that are quite expensive will come in at a lower cost. The other thing that, you know, we do sometimes is, because now we've got these projects voted, we can look for matching funds from other grants, outside organizations. So Rebecca and I are in the process of applying for a matching grant on the Shanahan Field parking one, so that would further reduce the amount.
Curious, since you have two parking projects going on potentially, If there's a
Yes.
single contractor bringing all the equipment in at one
Yes,
time.
it
yeah.
could be, yeah.
Is there any interruption to services? Would this, in theory, happen over the summer, or is this to be determined later in the year?
Yeah, I don't know. It probably wouldn't, because the time to, the bidding process, to get someone to work on it
Sure.
usually takes a few months. So
Sure.
it may not be able to happen either this fall or next spring, one or the other.
Sure.
But yeah, we try to avoid during soccer season, obviously.
Right. And my last question was just, if you can, I don't know if you have it off memory, but the Shanahan Field parking, roughly, how many square feet? Do you happen to know?
I don't have that, I don't have that information in front of me, but I can tell you this, that right now, approximately 35 to 40 cars parked there, whichever way they can. It's really, there's no rhyme or reason to it, because there's grass and asphalt, but there's no lines marked. So this project is going to at least double that. So there'll be at least 80 spots created that are all marked out, with the hope that, in combination with the increase in the parking spaces and then better enforcement of parking along Main Street, that it'll be a lot safer for people to be parking there.
Thanks.
The other thing I included for you tonight is just the status of the funds. And so you can see the balance of the FY '23 funds, once they get completely allocated at town meeting this year, are there, and we will have roughly $3.2 million in the total amount of all 5 funds that are related to CPA. And then with all these projects, if all of these projects were approved and fully cost what the proposal is, we would get it down to about $1.7 million. So the funds are there. We're not depleting anything. Every fund will still be in place. And again, I just want to emphasize that these funds are for very specific purposes. And you can think that, gee whiz, if we didn't have to spend the money on these projects, we could put it towards something else, but that's really not the case. We have CPA to fund projects like these, and these type of projects, many of them would never, ever get done if we didn't have CPA. So I'm very proud of the record that CPA has had over the past 16 or 17 years. We've funded about 65 or so projects, and we've got $3.2 million of matching funds from the state, which we never would have got to put towards these projects. And we've also got approximately $1 million of leverage matching funds from other organizations and grants that we file for. So, I mean, you can think that maybe it'd be better if you didn't have to pay the 3% of your property tax bill, but I think if you can do it, it's well worth it. And there is an exemption if you can't do it.
So I think that CPA is a great endeavor, and I completely agree. There are so many projects we wouldn't be able to do. And projects, some of them are extra projects that we're able to do. Some of them are necessary projects that we find that we can fund through CPA, that the town doesn't have to fund out of our other sources. But, I'm anticipating a lot of conversation about the parking lots, and it does seem like, such a large amount of money, and it's really hard for me to wrap my head around that for parking. I know there's a safety issue. It just seems like, you know, have we really vetted all alternatives? Is there no more fiscally responsible way to allow for safe parking at a field that's used for even such a small part of the year? I don't know. I'm really struggling with that. I'm thinking, you know, alternatively, what potentially is not going to be funded over time as we pave. You know, it's a hard decision to make. And the one other, you know, shade and seating at the Pines, I feel like for a $20,000 project, I think that's great. I think that's going to accommodate a lot of townspeople. But the Perry Park, if the design phase is potentially up to around $30,000, I'm just wondering what might be anticipated for, once we commit that, what might follow, what might be the follow-up needs to execute the design phase. Because you look at it, I mean, it just seems like it's a little piece of land in a common, in a triangle, you know.
Sure.
How do we wrap our heads around that being a wise investment of funds? I know it's a match. I know it's a large sum of money. I think it's a great resource for our town, but I think it still just needs to be vetted against other potential projects.
Yes. No, well, I agree with you. You know, certain projects, like this one in particular, may be hard to swallow. Unfortunately, if you look back at the history of the parking lot at Shanahan Field, I think we're paying for going way back, mistakes that were made about the placement of the little building there and how they left it. I mean, basically, they tore the building down, left it, and said, okay, now you can park here. And if you look at it closely, it's no different than it was when they tore the school down.
Because it was a horseshoe, right? You
Yeah.
probably drove in and dropped off like
Right.
in front of a school.
Right. So, you know, I mean, we're kind of paying for maybe a lack of planning, per se, about that sometime in the past. And the same thing with Perry Park, you know, we're kind of paying for a lack of maintenance. There's been no maintenance on Perry Park for probably 25 or 30 years. It's basically been allowed to degrade.
There's
And so
nothing
that's
there.
why I feel like on both of these things, the parking is expensive. Perry Park is like, well, all right, do we really want to, and how much is it really going to cost to fix it? But, you know, both of them are, I would put them in the category of these things will never, ever get done if we don't do them now, and they're only going to get more expensive. So unfortunately, but fortunately, we do have at least a source of money that we can do it, you know. I mean, if we look around town, there's lots of other things like that that don't fall into the CPA categories. And, you know, they don't get done because, you know, I mean, one would be that gas station sitting down in the square there. Why can't we fix that? Well, it's privately owned, there's a few other problems with it. And meanwhile, we have to drive through there and look at the stupid thing. Valley Screw, the same way, you know. These problems that we just can't get over and can't do anything about are very frustrating to me. And I'm glad that we can at least take care of a few of the things.
Well, that's a stretch.
Oh, well,
Come on. Yeah, is the lift in the BZ Park been put in?
what about
The
VZ Park?
handicap lift that we passed 2
Yes,
years ago?
it
But-
should be completed within about 6 weeks.
So it's
We're
ordered.
just waiting for the elevator, the lift itself to come in.
For last question / comment I'm going to make, but for Perry Park, why wouldn't you spend $30,000 to really just clean it up good? Maybe clean it up, would it cost more than that to seed it and to just clean it? And then it looks nice, but I just can't envision what else needs to happen there that is going to then be, we keep hearing, we make these improvements, then we have a maintenance issue. I don't know, I know it's a smaller item, but it's just a kind of a funny thing for me.
Yeah. Well, addressing something like, especially that with a park, without a plan is a mistake,
Yeah.
because you don't know what you're gonna end up with. And
I
so
guess I don't see it as a park.
But it is,
I
it's-
see it as a,
Yeah, well, that's the trouble, it's because how many people even know that it's there, so I think,
Why do they?
well, you wouldn't go spend time at that park.
Well, some people
It's got
do.
surrounded, it's in a dangerous place. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Just my quick comments on Shanahan having 3 young kids and having parked at that field during soccer and, trying to get a spot and trying to make sure kids aren't running out in between cars from parked on the grass, parked on the pavement, parked on the road. It's definitely a safety issue. We saw last year, the price was $500,000, and here we are a year later, and the price has escalated,
Right.
just like everything else we're seeing.
Not double. Sorry,
Did it just escalate, or did the design change year over
there
year?
is no design.
No, I think primarily the price escalated, right?
It's a combination of both. The price escalated, and one of the original feedbacks that we heard from the majority of the Board of Selectmen and other members was that there was no engineering and no plan, so they did not feel comfortable moving forward with allocating $500,000 towards something. So in order to make sure that we're accommodating those requests, we added engineering and construction monitoring into that price. So you will see that there's at least an $80,000 increase to the price overall for engineering services, which would also include stormwater infrastructure, et cetera. So there are other driving costs to this project, in addition to very much so construction escalation costs and prevailing wage rates, which would be something that we would need to abide by in order to proceed with the work on town property.
Any questions? All right, great. Thank you, Mike, for coming
Oh.
in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
So the next item on the agenda is to review the draft of the annual town meeting warrant. Rebecca, I don't know if you want to walk us through the ones with the financial impacts that we need to take part in. No, that's a,
I missed that question, my apologies.
no, I said I just didn't know if you wanted to walk us through the warrant for the items that needed our votes on them.
Yes, so this year you'll see that the town warrant was arranged in a little bit of a different manner than it has been in prior years past. I found that in reviewing some of the other warrants that were put forward by varying different communities, that this actually seemed to be the better way to organize the warrant so that people are more clear on what it is that they're voting on and where they are in the process, and we're lumping together those specific topics. So you'll see that we still have our summary of revenues, then we'll have general government matters, then we'll go into the general bylaw, the zoning bylaw, community preservation as a whole, appropriations, citizen positions, and then enterprise funds, and then we'll have our appendices as we usually do. So when we go through the process, I try to initiate where and what articles would require finance board recommendations. So all of those that deal with financial matters. I just actually caught one that doesn't, so my apologies. So we'll make those adjustments as we go along the way. But the majority of the ones you'll see will be in regards to the general bylaw. There are some fee changes that are being proposed, so we'll need to vote on those specific articles. That one would be Article number 13. Then we'll need to go through the CPC portion and then we'll go through the general, let's just back up. Take a second. So for the general bylaw, you will have 2 articles that the finance board needs to review. One of which being a a permit that will require a increase of fees. The second will be the Council on Aging bylaw, which will shift duties to the director and therefore have financial implications on the town. The next section will be the zoning. There's no zoning articles that deal with any financial related matters. Then we will head into the CPC portion, and the CPC portion will require Finance Board approval recommendations, as well as when we go into the appropriations, which will involve the revolving accounts and the transfer of monies to offset the tax base or come from free cash and other financial articles. And then there will be the citizens petition, which the board is free to weigh in on, but is not required. And then there'll be the enterprise fund, which will require the finance board recommendations.
Perfect. All right, so if we just jump in right at the beginning, just so we can go through, there are some at the very beginning that say Finance Board, so I just want to make sure we're on the same page whether or not we need to vote on them.
The first one with the planning board, that does not need to go for the finance board. Actually, the one in regards to Article number 3, the fiscal and prudent law, or the prudent investment rule, it is a financial related type of matter. So, I mean, if the finance board would like to weigh in on it, it's more in terms of the investments that we're able to make, being the treasurer collector. The Library Board of Trustees is also in charge of their funds, and therefore they would be able to utilize the firm that, Bartholomew, to make those types of investments as well. So there is a financial implication if the Finance Board does want to provide a recommendation for town meeting.
We're looking at Article 3. This talks about that prudent investment rule, which under, just quick, based on the notes, says that it gives a broader range of investments, some of which may be riskier than what we're allowed to do currently.
In savings bonds, but it would still be under all of the GASB rules, which are pretty,
Stringent.
yeah, the GASB rules control what municipalities can invest in, so that there's kind of an automatic check-in there, so that's fine with me.
Do we want to vote on that one?
What's the rough difference in averages for yearly?
Well, in a savings, it
It's
would
not,
be
yeah,
nothing.
right.
And then otherwise it would depend on what they're investing in, and it would depend on the time frame. It could go,
It's a few percent is what the target is, though. Gotcha.
yeah. Depending on whether it's, in, say, treasuries versus
Sure.
in the time horizon on all of them, but,
It's still a very, over-regulated area of, investment. It's just giving them more things
A little more freedom.
a little more freedom to take on something that, again, otherwise might not be able to, but there's still provisions in the Mass General Law that would regulate it, so.
I think it would make sense for us to.
Do we want to vote? Okay. Does anyone, do we want to do the same thing with one person making a motion and one person seconding? Is that the easiest way to do it?
Doesn't matter to me. I can,
You'll bounce back around? Okay. So I guess I will make the motion to recommend favorable action in order to allow the funds to be invested in accordance with the so-called prudent investment rule.
I'll second the motion.
Or any discussion?
sorry, I guess I should have waited for discussion, but since we weren't sure if we were going to vote on it or not, I thought that was kind of the discussion.
No, that's okay. Is all in favor? Aye, unanimous.
So there is the next one underneath, which is also a financial article, which I missed before, which is Article number 4. And that's in regards to accepting the provisions of Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 200A, Section 9A. And that deals specifically with the disposition of unclaimed property. So it provides for an alternative procedure for the disposing of abandoned funds known as tailings that are held in the custody of the town. Tailings can include uncashed accounts payable checks, uncashed payroll checks, and certain tax overpayments where the property owners cannot be found. Adopting the statute allows for more efficient and expedited processes for the disposing of abandoned funds, allowing the treasurer to take these funds as revenue into the general fund after there have been several attempts to notify the check recipient once one full year has passed since the original issuance. Without adopting this measure, the town would need to follow the Massachusetts Unclaimed Property Division's annual reporting guidelines following the 3-year dormancy period, use their due diligence process to notify the recipients. This measure allows the town to retain the funds while also allowing the treasurer to follow their own time frame for disposing of tailings.
Based on what you just read, this would allow us to basically shorten the amount of time the money will sit in limbo,
Yes.
and then it would allow us to take it back in as revenue after
Yes.
that period of time, all in accordance with what the law allows.
While providing proper notification
Right.
and
Right, like,
Trying
we're not
to-
just gonna be like, oh, you didn't cash your check, it's our revenue. Like,
exactly.
you'd have to follow the law to the points that it has, but it's a faster method than what currently is the unclaimed property.
More efficient, I would say.
Okay. I would make the motion to recommend favorable action to accept the provisions to manage abandoned funds in accordance with the referenced MGL.
I'll second the motion.
Any other discussion?
No,
All
I
in
think it's a
favor?
great idea.
Jim? Yep. Okay. Next one. Rebecca, you can stop me if I go past anything.
The next one would be Article 13.
So Article 13, okay? So this is a general bylaw amendment for unregistered motor vehicles. I am assuming that we would be looking to approve the increase in the penalty. Is that, because it's going from
That's correct.
$5 to $10 per day of violation. Do you know offhand how often we've had to enforce this? Do we have any?
I don't believe very often, but I believe that the last instance where this occurred, it caused quite a back and forth between the individual who was seeking enforcement from the building commissioner and the building commissioner's inability to act accordingly. So I don't see this as happening very often, but when it does happen, it does cause some controversy.
And doubling the fee would change the building commissioner's ability to enforce it?
I think that, $5 is very low, and to try and incentivize somebody to do what's being required, that an increase of the fee would provide a little bit more incentive. I mean, it's not going to change the world. I mean, $5 to $10, it's not a huge increase, but we're not in the business of trying to over-fine individuals either. So I think it's just more so giving a little bit more of a push to follow the law.
And I did notice that we have also changed it from one unregistered vehicle to two, so that somewhat seems to, I don't want to say offset the increase, but it does give people a little bit of flexibility if needed. Okay. I will make the motion to recommend favorable action. Does anyone have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Is there any other discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Unanimous. Okay, so next one, Rebecca, Article 14, this is the Council on Aging bylaws.
Correct. So because they're looking to give the responsibility of hiring and firing to the director themselves, there are financial implications that come along with such as unemployment, benefits, health insurance, things of that nature that need to be considered. So it's one of those where, since we fund retirement, the overall budget, we fund all of those other employee-type benefits, and we also have to compensate for unemployment. It was a bylaw change that would require the finance board to make a recommendation.
Other than is there any other department that can do this now?
The only department that can hire and fire without the Board of Selectmen approval currently would be the fire chief, but that's because of the strong chief statute. So he is appointed by the Board of Selectmen but can hire and fire his staff. Then there is the Board of Health. The Board of Health can appoint their own staff. And then currently there's the COA, and the COA board itself can appoint their own staff. But in those two cases, neither one report to the Board of Selectmen.
So they want complete autonomy.
I'm sorry?
They want complete autonomy, so they don't have to come for budget requests.
They somewhat have that now, which might be some of the confusion that we've had over the last few weeks, but at the same time, yes, there would be no oversight by the chain of command, being the Board of Selectmen and down under.
We do that for elected people. I know the Board of Health is okay, but I don't see this. This looks like it's excessive. So no one manages them except the director. Who put this in?
The Council on Aging proposed the warrant change for the, I don't know what if it was voted unanimously, but that's what was provided to me to add to the warrant.
When?
This one, I would want to say maybe 2 weeks ago.
So very recently.
Yes. I know that I was approached, I want to say last month, that they said that they were having meetings about it, and they had asked me about timeline of submission, but, so it was something they were talking about.
Are we allowed discussion?
Do we, I don't know, how do we make a motion if we can't discuss it?
Discuss it how?
Well, normally we make the motion and then we discuss it and vote. But we don't know what the motion is to make, because we're not sure yet. So I think it's okay to discuss it, yeah.
So, my feeling is that the town went in the direction of a town administrator several years ago, and that was a big move for us, and that was really to create some centralized planning efficiencies, decision-making, and also, not just centralized, but also in parity and consistency across the organization, so that there is consistency vis-a-vis different departments, procedurally, all that. And this seems to me like a bit of a step in the other direction. And the reason I asked when is because the other thing is, this also seems like a big change to me, given that it's going in kind of reverse direction. And when these things come up, sometimes they come up right before town meeting, they get put into the warrant, and there's not really enough time to really have thought, discussion to a big change. So for all of those reasons, I think it's backtracking for us, is my feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't necessarily like, kind of, the whole autonomy, not having to answer to anybody else, because that's where we're gonna run into what we had before the Collins wage study, where we had all these varying levels of salaries, and yes, you can, advocate for your department, but if you have complete control over that, but it doesn't fit within our budget, then what happens? So if you go out and you hire someone and it's more than what our budget allows for, are we then supposed to just make it work? How does that?
So I think that's the big concern, right? Because there's no responsibility to the budget as a whole. They're only concerned about their department budget, and then the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Board are supposed to be reactive to that and then try and make it work without having the ability to say yay or nay. So removing that type of structure causes a lot of the back and forth as to, well, it's your job to figure out where it fits in the budget. And that's not how, as financial administrators, we're thinking about it. We're thinking about how we can accomplish all of the needs of the community and how we can balance that and make it all work. So there is a concern that might happen when there's no structure from the top down, because they are to the side.
And while I entirely understand that anybody wants to thoroughly advocate for their department, and that's why they are in that role, I get that, but I still think that we need to consider the organization cohesively.
So let's move the motion or not. You don't have to.
So I guess I would make the motion to recommend unfavorable for the,
What article is this?
this is Article 14. Yeah, I would make the motion to recommend unfavorable.
And I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion on it?
I'm just curious what the biggest pro they could see in doing this was. Is it just an efficiency gain? Yeah, I think more discussions, maybe more time is needed, as you said.
Yeah, I feel like, we're
to
just
do
like
something like this.
rushing through without really having that ability to have the conversation and understand why the changes are needed, what the benefit is of it, and then, again, how do we ensure going down the road that the town as a whole isn't gonna become into a position where we have to react to something that, doesn't fit within the budget, and we're just kind of left to figure it out, and we don't have that open communication.
I agree. And what's the model we want going forward across all these different groups, right?
Okay.
Did we vote?
So we have a motion and a second. The motion is to recommend unfavorable. So all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. And Rebecca, you said we did not have to do anything with the zoning. So then the next group of warrant articles would be the 7 articles that Mike just spoke about. Article number 17. This is just Article 17 is the estimated revenues that are recommended by the committee for the expenses, debt service, projects, and other expenses. It's a separate appropriation.
The set-asides that are required.
Correct, yes. And these are, Rebecca, can you confirm, these are specific percentages that they have to set aside, correct? Or is,
Correct. I don't have the paper in front of me.
right, that's based on, I don't think he has the percentages, but a certain percentage has to go to open space, a certain, is that, or am I misremembering?
I know there's a certain percentage that needs to be allocated to each of the three buckets, being the open space and recreation, the housing, and the historic
And the-
preservation.
okay.
10% of revenues, 5% admin.
So yes, so we believe it's 10% for the projects and 5% for administration of the revenues collected.
Okay. Article 17.
So it's a, excuse me, so it's a minimum of 10% of the revenues. So
Okay.
you could provide more.
Okay, so, based on this, I would recommend favorable action.
I'll second that.
Is there any other discussion on that? No?
Nope.
Okay, all in favor? Aye, unanimous. Okay, so Article 18, we actually get into the individual projects. Article 18 is for the community garden, requesting the amount of $4,950. Do we want to,
I think we can just vote.
I think we can just vote through these. Okay. So I'll make the motion to recommend favorable action.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Article 19 is to appropriate $6,600 for the placement of Washington Hall on the National Historic Registry. I will make the motion to recommend favorable action.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on that one? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Article 20 is the shade and seating at the Pines. They're looking to appropriate $21,426. I would recommend favorable action.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion? All in favor? The next article is Article 21. This is for the town clerk document scanning. They're looking to appropriate $33,000, and this would allow the town clerk to scan historic documents to be made more searchable by our residents. I will make the motion to recommend favorable.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion on that one? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that one's unanimous. The next one, Article 22, this is for Perry Park Design. They're looking to appropriate $30,800. I will make the motion to recommend favorable action.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any more discussion on that one? All in,
I don't think it's necessary, so I'll be in the vote.
okay. All in favor? So 3, and Jim would be a no? Okay, so that would be 3 to 1. The next article, Article 23, is the parking enhancement at the Pines. They're looking to appropriate $523,110. I would make the motion to recommend favorable action.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion on that one? All in favor? Aye. Jim, are you a yes? Okay.
Not enough information. It's $500,000 with an amount and a brief description. That street's on Main Street, so I don't know what kind of playground you want to put there, but it wouldn't be safe anyway. But we're going way out with this $1.5 million going forward. This is unprecedented. So, no.
I personally think it's a huge amount of money. I made my comments before. I am not particularly comfortable with it, but
This is for the Pines.
both of them.
Okay.
Both of them. Sorry, but yeah, you made a comment regarding the Main Street one, but you're really talking about both of them together. But I think the town meeting should be able to have an opinion, so that's. And also, the Board of Selectmen has not,
Yes, the board voted on Monday.
and they voted to, that's right, Mike said that, they voted to approve. So I feel that in support of that, I feel like we should at least just push it through to town meeting for decisions.
I'm just pulling up my notes from Monday. The Pine parking was unanimous by the Board of Selectmen. Article 24 is the parking creation at Shanahan Field. Looking to appropriate up to $886,800. I would make the motion to move favorable.
I don't agree with this one, given that high dollar amount. I think the cap's too high.
I'll second the motion for discussion and vote.
Okay. So,
What did the Board of Select?
the
what-
Board of Selectmen passed it 3-2. So there was a lot of discussion regarding the cost and the safety issues that have come in. There was question about why we had to add lighting, which is coming from the chief of police to ensure that the lot is lit so that there's nothing going on there that they can't see as they're driving by. But it was, 3-2 for the 5.
Yeah, we don't have any detail on that amount, do we? So is this the new standard? At least when I was on the Capital Board, we had to have some details around approving or disapproving it. Now it's just a 2 or 3 liner, 800 and some odd thousand. We gotta do better than that. So put it up to a vote, please.
Okay, so the vote is, the motion was to recommend favorable. It was seconded. So all in favor? So that would be 2-2.
Well, they should vote
right?
well, I'll put 2 and then
Yeah.
I'll do the quick math there. I think that's great. I think it's a split vote. I think it's going to cause discussion at town meeting, which is what we want to happen. I think that we'll have time to get more information,
Yeah, I think town meeting would kill it.
so,
So for Article 24, unfavorable action,
oh, it's a split.
It's a
Just
split.
let 2-2.
wouldn't that mean that it fails?
Yeah.
Or would-
Yep.
But we can put the count, 2-2.
Well, the motion was for favorable action.
Favorable,
There was
right.
no motion for unfavorable action.
Still would be 2-2.
So then we can put
I
that.
mean, so we moving on from this?
I'm just saying, I think it would be helpful if we put that it was split, that it's a,
Okay, you can do that.
that's all.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Thank you. That it wasn't unanimous, that
And
there was a
will you name-
conversation.
Will you name who was favorable and who wasn't?
I'm sure you will do that.
I'll do that.
Okay, so the next item, Article 25, we start with the appropriations. So the next article is to set the annual spending limits for the 7 revolving funds. So the Bagnell Summer Program for $200,000, the Council on Aging for $15,000, the Fire Department CPR class for $6,000, Groveland Day $30,000, the Pines Boat Ramp for $25,000, the Recreation Operation and Maintenance for $75,000, and the Wetlands Protection Act of $20,000.
And I did make an error and did not add that the Board of Selectmen or the Finance Board recommendation, so I've just added those underneath the article.
Yes.
Are these consistent with last year? The amounts? I thought we
I
had.
think we decreased the Bagnell Summer Program by $50,000, and we increased the Recreation Operation and Maintenance to 75 from 50, mainly because that used to only be the Pines Recreation Area, and now it encompasses all of our fields and open space area, as we're collecting fees and other fees associated with special events, permits, etc.
I was just pulling up last year's.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so I would make the motion to recommend favorable action to set these spending limits.
I'll second that motion.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? So the next couple of articles are for various transfers. The first, Article 26, is to see if the town will vote to transfer the sum of $125,000 from the following accounts: Groveland Municipal Electric Operating Account for $40,000, and from fiscal year '24 free cash in the amount of $85,000. These monies would be used to reduce the fiscal year '25 tax rate. So I would make the motion to move favorable on this one.
And I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion on that? No. All in favor? Unanimous? So the next article is Article 27, to see if the town will transfer $343,273 from free cash to the following accounts: Stabilization Fund, $50,000, Capital Stabilization Fund, $50,000, Municipal Building Improvements, $50,000, the MS4 Stormwater Permit Account, $5,000, the Personnel Buyback Account, $5,000, the Opioid Settlement Account, $4,844, purchase a line cruiser for the police department for $64,967, to fund the electrical study for the town hall complex for $25,000, to purchase a generator for the town hall complex, $68,462, and to match the FEMA fiscal year '25 Assistance to Firefighter Grant, $20,000. I will make the motion to move favorable so that we can discuss this a little bit more.
I'll second that motion.
Rebecca, this is a large chunk of money coming out of free cash.
Mhm.
Can you just give us an update on what our free cash balance looks like today, what happens after this, and where we stand?
So certified free cash as of July 1st, 2023 was $460,000, 444. We had reduced the tax rate as we have done historically by $85,000, which will leave us remaining $375,444. As we historically have done, and we've actually decreased the amount of monies that we've contributed to our stabilization accounts from $100,000 to $50,000. So we would then reduce that by $50,000 for both of those stabilization accounts. Then we also have our sick buyback, which is something we just talked about before, that employees come with a lot of cost, and therefore when somebody retires or when they leave, we do have obligations to pay them out for the time that they have accrued. Therefore, with a retirement that just recently happened and preparing for a retirement that will be coming within the next few years, we are trying to, again, add monies into that account as much as we possibly can responsibly, which is why you only see $5,000. The opioid settlement monies, we have no choice in the matter. That's $4,844. They recently passed legislation that would allow us to put that money into a revolving account. That was not something that had happened before. Those were monies that we got from the settlement that happened with the opioid from Johnson & Johnson and some of the other firms. Therefore, we need to transfer those funds into the revolving account so that we can then have those moving forward. So you will not see something like this in the next town meeting. It is only a one-time thing since we had the legislation change, but we do need to move those monies as we are legally required to do. The next one is for the MS4. As you'll see, we have historically allocated due to the need to comply with the federal government mandates through the state. That has decreased substantially over the last few years. We have now been utilizing the MVPC for consulting services to help us wrap up the permit. There has been some extensions and some changes that have taken place, and therefore we still do need to have monies in that account to allow for the reporting and other types of measures to take place to ensure compliance. The other items that you're seeing that are being reduced from free cash are part of the capital improvement plan. So you'll have the municipal building upgrades, which is the $50,000. We've used that very successfully over the last 2 years to help aid in a lot of the projects that are under $10,000 and under $20,000 that require more immediate assistance. That does not dip into our repairs money or our supplies money that you typically see in our operational fund under the municipal buildings department. The other is the cruiser. We've always funded the cruiser, or historically, funded the cruiser from our free cash, so that's looking for another reduction of $64,967. Then the generator that was approved as part of the capital improvement plan, that's another $68,462. And then there's the electrical study for $25,000 that was approved as part of that. The last remaining monies that we're looking to reduce free cash by is the $20,000. The fire department has gone out for, or would like to participate in a grant, the regional grant, and so this would be the match that would be required for the radios. This was something that was put in the annual town meeting in 2021, I believe. It was allocated, however, the grant was not received, and therefore the money still stayed in free cash. So the same would apply in this particular instance, where we would allocate the $20,000. If the grant was received, this would go towards our match, and we would get equipment that I believe is up to $200,000 in with the regional partners that applied for the grant. So the subtotal special purposes for those that we just described was $343,273. So the remaining free cash would be $32,171.
Does this keep us within our financial policies as far as free cash stabilization, all of the goals that we had created via the policies recently?
It would keep us in the policy of funding some of the reserve accounts as we had strived to do, including OPEB stabilization accounts. Does it leave our reserve where we want to from a free cash perspective? It does not from my calculations.
It
And
will
that-
take a while to get to those goals.
Okay.
So for anyone like watching at home who's trying to understand what we're running in our brains right now, you're telling us there's $32,000 left after we vote this. So if there is a large expense that comes in that is more than $32,000, what would happen?
We would use our stabilization or our capital stabilization to fund it in addition to utilizing the free cash that we had available to us.
And reserves. That got lowered. It's 10.
Plus, we would need another town meeting to use any free cash, right?
The only one that we had typically done in the past was snow and ice. Based upon the last storm, I'm not sure exactly where we fall with that number prior to the last.
Well, we never got plowed, so I hope we didn't spend a whole lot of money on that last.
So I
storm.
don't believe so. I think we're still in good shape, but I just don't want to say 100% because I have not seen the bills come through. So I'm not sure exactly how much money was spent on that, but that is something that we would utilize free cash for historically. As you saw in the variance report and email that Ellen had recently sent out, there was or there will be a deficit in the Essex Tech school assessment that we had for the current fiscal year. It's a very difficult line item to estimate for the fiscal year. Just they don't really give you much detail, and we're not exactly 100% sure what they have for applications. So that was $29,000 short. But due to the upgraded assessment that was done by the Pawtucket Regional School District in October, because there was a calculation error that was found where a cell carried through. So it was one of those Excel madness type situations. We did get a revised assessment, and therefore we can cover the shortage of the Essex Technical School in an educational line item, and therefore we'll be able to use those funds accordingly. So we will not, as of right now, need to utilize any free cash for any items that we
In fiscal '24.
see as of now. If that changes, we can always go back and we can, if in the next few weeks we find out prior to town meeting that the snowstorm hypothetically costs us an additional $50,000 that we did not have available to us, we could take a look at the list and say, well, we would have to take it from our stabilization anyway, so let's decrease the stabilization input into the account by X amount and pay this for the free cash, and we can make those types of amendments on the floor as needed. So we still have a little bit of flexibility, not as much transparency aspect, but as soon as we were to describe the situation, I don't think anybody would think that there was, anything sketchy going on there. But that's essentially what we have before us. It's not an ideal amount, but that doesn't also take into consideration what could be built in our reserves, part of what we didn't spend this fiscal year. So we, this year, had an opportunity, the current fiscal year, we had an opportunity to put $30,000 into our reserve. If we don't have to use those $30,000 in our reserve for any transfer, year-end transfers, or any of the deficits, that will fall back to free cash. So then you're looking at about $62,000 that could be used for next fiscal year. So there's other ways that we build up our free cash by being fiscally conservative in our spending of our line items. If there's any additional monies that revenues that were estimated that came in over, or anything of that nature. So even though we are remaining.
That's exactly how we have the free cash that we have this year
Exactly.
from
So I
the
just mean
last year's budget.
that I know that 32 is not ideal and we should strive for more, and I want to strive for more moving forward, but there are the other numbers and figures that contribute to what we have next year. So it's not like we're saying, next year we just have $32,000
Right,
as
right,
free cash.
I just want, we throw out the, free cash and stable, so I just want to make sure people understand how it all comes together. Okay, so we had the motion to move favorable. We had the second. Is there any other discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous. The next article is Article 28, and this is to appropriate or transfer from the PEG Access and Cable Related Fund the sum of $150,000 to be used to fund the cable access services, supplies, and equipment for the next year. I will make the motion to move favorable.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on this?
That is a decrease from last fiscal year. Last fiscal year, we had increased it to $250,000. That was mainly due to some building improvements that we were taking into consideration. So we will be addressing those, which is the lovely main elephant in the room. So hopefully, once that moves, you'll see why we increased that amount, but being fiscally conscious of where we are with those funds and that they're not guaranteed for a lifetime, and they do pay for our cable technicians' time and other types of things and getting the meetings on television. We wanted to reduce that to the 150 to be mindful that there is not an additional capital need.
And then this is the money that comes from the
Comcast.
contract with Comcast.
The license, correct.
Yep. Okay, any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? All right, Article 29 is to vote to transfer the sum of $8,771 from the Conservation Commission fee account to the Conservation Commission expense account for fiscal year '25 for the commission's operating costs. I will make the motion to move favorable.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on that? No. Okay, all in favor? Unanimous? Okay, Article 30, to see if the town will appropriate $5,012 from the premiums received upon the sale of bonds issued for the Center Street land purchase, which are subject to a Proposition 2.5 debt exclusion to pay the cost of the project being financed by bonds or notes, and reduce the amount authorized by the same amount. Rebecca, can you just quickly explain this one?
So this is due to legislation, it's called the Municipal Modernization Act. So any bond premiums we're able to utilize towards other, or towards the current debt that we have and paying down that debt. So we have a surplus from the bond premiums of the $5,000, and we would like to utilize that to pay towards the outstanding bonds that we have currently.
Okay. I will make the motion to move favorable.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on that?
Oh, I think it's a great idea.
Okay, all in favor? Unanimous? Article 31 is to see if the town will vote to transfer a sum to be determined as follows. To transfer from the receipts reserved for the sale of town buildings, $91,003.70 plus any additional interest earned until the date of transfer, and the premiums received on the sale of bonds between November 7th, 2016 and December 7th, 2021. Going to assume those dates are important. $44,956.62. And then it's going to be used for the highway garage replacement and the public safety generator replacement. I will make the motion to move favorable.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on that?
No, just these are funds that we talked about with you last year that had been found through that reconciliation project that created the clean audit report, and it addressed some of the, other outstanding items and money that was now identified that could be just put to appropriate use.
It wasn't part of the rec process, it was more part of how Rebecca changed the capital improvement plan. And she just came to me as part of the plan and said, do you know of any funds? And I said, yes, I've had these funds sitting here. And we looked up the laws around them, and that's where those came from. It wasn't so much that all tied with the bank rec, that was just one account, the bank rec. One haunting account.
But we identified funds that were available that we could use to fund other expenditures.
Correct.
Okay, so we had the motion and the second, correct? Okay, any other discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Article 32 is to see if the town will vote to fix the salary and compensation of elected officers. So this article, once voted at the town meeting and once the budget is approved, would set the salaries for all of the elected officers. So I would make the motion to recommend favorable action.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on that? All in favor? Unanimous?
Well, there's not a lot of compensation for elected officers this year, so.
Okay, Article 33 is to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate and transfer from available funds or otherwise provide to meet the salary and wages of employees, expenditures and outlays of the town departments, and any other expenditures necessary. So this is the fiscal year budget that we discussed last week. I guess, Rebecca, now is a good time to note that at the meeting on Monday, there was a discussion that came up regarding the certain line items, and while there's no net change to the total budget, there are some small changes to some of the line items, and some of these numbers may need some tweaking.
That's correct. The line items that you see before you, general government has been changed and human services has been changed, but the total budget allocation remains the same.
Can you just give us an update on what happened at the Board of Selectmen meeting?
Of course. So at the Board of Selectmen meeting, the board voted to address a request in terms of the salary wage issue presented by the Council on Aging Director, and therefore they reduced the line item for the Council on Aging expenses from 3,500 to 0, and for the vehicle maintenance expenses, they reduced it from 2,500 to 0 and added that amount to the COA Assistant Director's salary. Then, in addition to that, in order to get to the number that they were looking for, and when we were looking at the budget, when originally this was brought to my attention and during a conversation that was had on Friday, there was another area when I looked at the budget that there was a miscalculation. When we had talked originally about adding the $3,000 for the election expense reimbursement that we discussed for the town clerk, I had added that to the revenue side, but I also added it to the expenditure side, since that was $3,000 in addition to what she had already requested for an increase for that fiscal year. So therefore, there was additional monies within that line item. So that line item was reduced by $2,067.83, and that additional monies was given back into the COA Assistant Director line item for a total of $66,608.85. And the town clerk still remains to have a little over $1,000, well, just about $1,000 for the detail that she requested in addition for the November election. So that wasn't something that had been covered or discussed, so she had requested that, so we left that in the line item so that she would have the funds in order to hire a police detail for the presidential election in November. So the board approved those changes, and therefore, as we just stated, those two lines, being general government and human services, were changed, but again, the total budget remains the same.
Can you just walk me through the numbers so that I can put them in the spreadsheet and make sure we have the same?
So for the expense line items, it was 0. For the COA vehicle maintenance expense, it was 0. And then for the town clerk elections line item, it is now $25,682.97.
$82.97. Okay. You said 25,000, correct?
I have, yes, $25,000 and 3,500.
And then what is the Council on Aging Assistant Director? Is that going up to the 67,000 that they asked for?
Nope, excuse me, no, it will go to $66,608.88 per the classification analysis that was provided and confirmed by Mary Accardi with the Collins Center.
I'm checking these. So what we've done in the past when we've changed the line items on a budget, we've already voted for. Obviously, we would make the motion to reopen and revisit these. I'm just looking because I actually have a different, I have the same total, but I don't have the same breakout. 1083030, 303363, 344312. So for human services, I have, just trying to double check that these all total up. Just gonna try to make this calculate. So for human services, Rebecca, when I go through the spreadsheet we looked at last week, I come out with 339, 216.92. At 337. Because the 337, 149.89 was what you had proposed.
I'm sorry?
So the human services, 337, 149.89, that's before the adjustment that was made.
So for the human service, $339,216.92.
So the draft we have is 337, 149.89.
That has been increased with the addition, and then the general government has been decreased.
692. And then your general government with the revision,
Is $2,348,978.87.
7887. And then that gives us $398.55.
Sorry,
$398.55 is what you have left over.
I didn't hear you.
At the end, the excess,
The
$398.
total,
What we have left over from revenues to expenses, $398.55.
oh, I have $398.55.
Okay. So the amounts that are in the draft warrant that we have the general government should be with the changes that the Board of Selectmen voted, would be $2,348,978.87. And the human services would be $339,216.92. Total budget remains the same at $23,391,891.22. Just so everyone we're all on the same page. So this is what it would look like. So, but it still comes down to that same number. Jim, did you get that little change?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
We need to vote on it or not?
yeah, so we'll make the motion to approve motion to recommend favorable Article 33 with the revised amounts as discussed, that total $23,391,891.22.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor, any other discussion, really quick? All in favor? Unanimous. Okay. The next item would be Article 36, which is the enterprise fund. So this is with water and sewer. This is to vote to transfer the sum of $70,000 from their sewer retained earnings to fund the replacement on the roof of the sewer pump station. I would recommend favorable action.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion on that? All in favor? Unanimous? The next Article 37 is to transfer the sum of $200,000 from the water retained earnings to fund a pilot study pertaining to water filtration and a feasibility study to look at buying water from Haverhill. I would recommend favorable action.
I'll second that.
Is there any discussion? No? All in favor? Unanimous? Article 38, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate $1,284,074.88 to fund the water department salaries and expenses for fiscal year '25, which will be offset by, should that also read fiscal year '25, Rebecca? Water department revenue? It says fiscal year '24. This is to fund the salaries. So Article 38. $38. Is it coming from '24 revenue or '25 revenue?
Who can't you hear her? Yes. You aren't turned on.
Yes, both of them updated and should be fiscal year 2025.
So $1,284,074.88. Make the motion to recommend favorable.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? The next Article 39 is to raise and appropriate $737,563.38 to fund the sewer department salaries and expenses for fiscal year '25, some to be offset by fiscal year '25 revenue. I will make the motion to recommend favorable action.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on that one? All in favor? Unanimous? And that is the end of the articles that we have.
So yes, and we only had one citizen's petition that has been submitted, which is for changing the Board of Selectmen to the Select Board. The only note I wanted to make sure that you were aware is that there was a technicality, and any zoning bylaw that would need to be changed would require a public hearing through the planning board with proper notification, so that even though it was submitted on time and submitted correctly, it did not go through the proper process. So if approved or if voted in favor, it will only impact the general bylaw, and we will need to go back at the next town meeting, whether special or annual, and correct the zoning bylaw based upon that technicality. But that should be a formality based upon the outcome of the town meeting. And then the warrant does not close until Friday, the 29th at noon. One of the reasons was I know that there was a group with the library who was looking to change the bylaw to make the Board of Selectmen the appointing authority for the director to correspond with some of the centralized management issues that we've been having, and as discussed with the other departments. So that has not been submitted, but that was one of the ones that was looking to be submitted, and a petition had been circulated, so I'm not sure where that stood in the process. So that could be another article that might appear in the warrant that you don't necessarily see before you this evening. But otherwise, the only other article, or the only other item that you'll see on the ballot is there was a petition put forward for the Community Preservation Act repeal. That goes on the ballot based upon a 5% or receiving 5% certified signatures of the voters. It does not have to go before town meeting. There was some back and forth over that because of the way that we adopted the CPC back in 2004. So we adopted the community preservation bylaw by town meeting warrant, but we adopted and accepted the Community Preservation Act through a ballot vote. And therefore, the only way that it can be repealed is through a ballot vote. So the individuals did submit a citizen's petition, but with the 5% of the signatures. So we did contact the state, and the state did agree that the intent was there and the signatures had been certified. So that will be placed on the ballot to be voted on. So that will not be on your warrant, but again, something I wanted to alert the finance board so that they are aware that there is a question on the ballot to repeal CPC.
So there's 5% of the voters have signed the petition. And so it goes to the ballot for all registered voters, and then the majority would make the decision at that point.
Correct. And then what will end up happening is that, as it's listed in the question, is that the 3% surcharge that is assessed on the taxes will no longer take place the following fiscal year. However, the monies that have been received thus far, or that we've taken in thus far, would in fact stay in that account and would need to be used for those purposes set aside: historic preservation, open space and recreation, and affordable housing. So those monies would still need to be utilized until the account was zero, and then we would need to go through the process of making sure that we updated our general bylaw to remove the Community Preservation Act, or Community Preservation Committee.
So that's just a little unfortunate that we therefore don't have an opportunity to have that discussion at town meeting to maybe educate the voters about community preservation. I mean, my concern is it's when you don't go in to vote with a real educated, you're going to see, oh, less taxes, yeah, sure, without having that other side of the discussion as to what community preservation means
What the
to us.
impact is to the community by removing it, because as, yes, the state doesn't match dollar for dollar, but, I mean, anyone who, if you had a 401k at work and they told you, we will match you 64 cents of every dollar you put in, or 45 cents for every dollar you put in, you're going to be putting it in there to get that free money.
Right.
And so,
We've received
yes, the total state match.
$3.25 million in state match.
Right, last year was 200,000, but when you go back and you look at the history, $3.2 million, we wouldn't have had to do funding of projects that we do see.
One other thing that I would comment about community preservation is, these are just the projects that Groveland residents have brought forward. That's how they come to us. If anybody had a project that was important to them, you can bring it forward. You can make things happen, and there happens to be, funds to support that. So it's not like there is a committee that organizes and oversees it, but people have the ability to bring forth whatever projects they want. So if you don't believe in it because you don't like the projects, then you have input, residents have input to that, that's all.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from our March 20th, 2024 meeting, which Ruth distributed out to everybody last week. I don't know if everyone had a chance to go through and read them. I can make the motion to accept those minutes.
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion on them? All in favor? Unanimous. Rebecca, I don't know if you have any other town administrator updates? Nope, okay. So the next item on the agenda is to plan our next meeting. Based on what we have right now before us as information, there's nothing of pressing matters before the town meeting. We've gone through the budget, we've gone through the warrant. I would say that I would recommend we keep April 10th open as an if-needed meeting. If something comes up between now and that first week of April that you need us to meet for, if you could just let us know, so that way we can get together before the warrant closes on, or has to be posted. And then, I think other than that, I think we can, what we've done every year is always just plan to meet just immediately before the town meeting, if, you know, anything comes up that we need to address for the town meeting, which was April 29th.
It's the last Monday, it's not the fourth Monday,
It is the last Monday of the month, correct?
April 29th.
April 29th. In the school, the town meeting right now is at 6:30, so I think we can, you know, target a 6 o'clock. We generally don't need to do anything substantial before that, just. The next item on the agenda is anything not reasonably anticipated at the time of posting. I don't know if anyone has anything. I do not. No, we're good. All right, then is there a motion to adjourn
Motion to adjourn.
at 6:39?
6:39.
I will second that. All in favor? Unanimous.
That's
Thank-
funny, the last one was 6:36.
All right, thank you, everybody.
6:39.